Good evening, everyone. I would like to open up November's meeting of the Conservation Commission. Our next meeting date is December 17th, and continued hearings will go to that date. The September minutes have come out for approval, but I don't know that enough members of the board have had a chance to read them. They came out late, so I would like to table that until next month. We have a continued notice of intent to approve the right-of-way and construct an emergency access driveway from the town of Newbury at 14th Street. This hearing will be continued to the December 17th, 2019 meeting. We have a request for determination of applicability to expand and enclose the existing deck with screens from Dennis Palazzo at 67 Old Rowley Road. Good evening, Dennis. Oh, you're up.
Wow. Okay. Hi. Hi. So, I have a set of rudimentary plans that I can pass around. You probably all have a copy now.
Did you give Jen a copy of the ad? Do you have that with you before we get started? So
Okay.
perfect.
I think it's, I should have circled it for you. So anyway, the picture of the existing platform is 5x7, and my intention is to expand that to 9x12 and enclose it with screens because of the threat of triple E and the mosquitoes and green hens and whatnot, and we all know all about that because we all live in town.
Any questions for the applicant? Frankly, I don't have any.
So do you, does anybody want to see the,
Larger plan?
the same one as, well, that's-
There's an existing silt fence on the property?
yes,
Your silt fence is still up?
it's still up here.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's right off the driveway. He's included some pretty decent pictures in his application if you want to get a good sense for where it sits.
So this is, so we go back to this one, this is the existing,
Mhm.
the blue would be the proposed, this is the existing, and then it would come to the end of the house, and then you can.
Yeah. Now I know Chester.
Oh,
I see,
okay.
with the flag on there. There we go. Great, thank you.
So it would come to the end of the house here, and go up 4 more feet.
Yeah, probably not exactly that, but so.
Any questions? Anybody else have concerns?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any butters here? Would anyone like to speak on this project? I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Dennis. Dennis, I'm sure you know about it. You've been through this before. 10-day appeals period starts the day after the postmark on the envelope that we send your determination out in.
Okay.
So it's probably a good 2 or 3 weeks after the meeting.
Winter time, nothing's gonna happen until spring.
It's a 3-year permit, so you're good with that.
Thank you.
Take care.
There you go, awesome stuff to you.
It's a big responsibility on my end, you know. We have a request for determination of applicability to pave 4,700 square feet of existing parking area from Chrissy Rupp at 67 Newburyport Turnpike. Good evening.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
My name is Barry. This is Chrissy.
Here's Chrissy.
There's Chrissy.
And yours, please.
Okay. Picture, we'll pass it around also.
of the project was to restore a wetland area that was impacted by a clay area and rebuild a new clay area. The first page is highlighting that brown shaded area. In order to do that, we had to work within an area that was designed originally for the stormwater management system. So basically what we did in order to accommodate the pre and post mitigation is we basically designed that whole area as a huge storage system, but it's also an infiltration system. The brown area represents wood chips that allows any water that falls on it obviously to permeate through the wood chips. Below that, there is a 2-foot layer of 3/4 inch of crushed stone that also provides volume storage. And it also allows the water to continue to fall through to the soil below and slowly infiltrate. We also incorporated a couple of rain gardens along the edge of the driveway to also promote stormwater infiltration. So when you're dealing with obviously adding more pavement to the parking lot, the question becomes how are we impacting that pre and post impact to the peak flow, but also the infiltration. The original design of the BMPs had no accommodation for any infiltration. What we've done is provide a very large area to allow the water to infiltrate into the ground and recharge. I'm going to be pretty honest here, the soils aren't great. I think Newbury has a reputation of having, don't mean it's a bad way, but having not great soils. But any soil, regardless of how bad it is, can infiltrate. In this particular case, the way we're infiltrating is a very large area with the water dispersed over a very large area, which allows that water to more or less be able to slowly infiltrate into the system or into the soils. So what Chrissy would like to do with all of this is there's a couple of areas that are gravel that become kind of a maintenance problem for her in the winter. They also, to be quite frank, when you're plowing gravel, it takes that gravel, puts it into the catch basins, and that becomes part of the TSS that starts to flow towards the infiltration system. So what we're here tonight is to request that we be able to pave those areas to stabilize what I would consider to be the gravel areas, to prevent them from impacting the infiltration systems in the ground gradient problems, and also improve winter conditioning for the kids and parents that are dropping off their kids to the daycare center. Chrissy can probably talk more better to that.
I just want to say just briefly, there's 2 gravel patches on either side, and this center is gravel. It doesn't treat in the ice the same way that pavement does. When we put salt down on the pavement, within a couple hours it heats up and it's clear and black. The gravel areas are building up a couple of inches of ice over the winter, and we have probably 90% of our people that are in and out of our property are moms who have little toddlers with them and who are pregnant, and they're walking across this very icy patch. We've had every winter somebody gets their car stuck, and me and my preschool teachers are outside trying to push her car off of ice. We can't properly mark the parking spaces on the gravel area. So since the beginning of this school year, we've had 3 fender benders in that little section of the driveway because Grammys come in to drop off and they just park their car terribly. And then the maintenance issue, the gravel is just always being pushed around. But that's the least concern. I feel like I have a liability issue on my hand. I have a lot of pregnant moms that are walking in really icy conditions, and I'm trying to resolve that.
But in terms of the impact and the overall broader conversation with the stormwater management, again, the system that we redesigned accommodates infiltration, definitely accommodates the pre and post, and this additional pavement will have no impact on that. free increased peak flow. And it's also gonna be directed to, obviously, this infiltration system, which is below, display area. Again, like I said, the wood chips on the top is also, allows the water to go right through this playground wood chips. It's not bark mulch, it's the larger,
See what you,
which is, we have to put that down for safety reasons. It's a requirement for these type of playground areas, but it's got a large void, it allows water to go right through, so.
my guess would be too, that if you plow gravel off of here, I imagine you end up with perched, catch basins every once in a while.
Yeah.
And then you don't treat any of it.
They don't treat any of it, right?
Are there any questions for the applicant?
I would say the only question I have is there some kind of numbers to support your intention?
I put those in,
Look at those,
Not that
not that well, I know that none of us are,
but, as long as there's, some engineering gone into this, further evaluation.
Does that thing asphalt?
any other questions for the applicant?
Do we need to worry about where the water's actually gonna go?
Well, where the water's actually gonna go is
no,
into.
you go into, there are two catch basins.
Oh, okay, sorry, I missed the catch basin.
Right,
Gotcha.
there's
Yeah,
catch basins up
okay,
there, they get
perfect.
this big area,
Beautiful.
and my guess is with gravel, that most of the time they're not working anyway, because they end up getting perched and the gravel comes out from around them, and so then this is getting no treatment, and it's probably coming down into the.
And the catch basins, are discharging to the new, rain garden swales.
Perfect,
So they get good treatment on the way in.
perfect. That's great.
And we wanna point out that the rain gardens, are in fill, and that fill is a granular fill, so that allows for even greater, infiltration. Granted, it eventually reaches that, not so great soil, but it does provide for some good disbursement and treatment, so.
Anything else from the board? Are there any butters here? Would anyone like to speak on this project? Then I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Move for a negative determination.
Second one.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Looks like the ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're always laughing at this end of the table.
No, I like to hear it. Strong competition guys that I get it. Take out it. It's driving me to be even more sloppy and small.
Not possible.
Not possible. Launch.
We have a request for determination of applicability to install a rooftop solar array from John and Ann Cassidy at 68 Fordham Way. Hello.
James Manzer with Revision Energy, the contractor.
We got a copy of the ad already.
Okay, great.
Jen, do you want the actual tier?
I brought it.
What do we got in here?
Yeah, so we have a pitched roof to the south.
Doesn't look like much.
Yeah, we're just adding 15 panels. So that's a roof right here, so not the upper roof, but this lower pitch that overhangs a little bit of the deck there. a bit of an overview. I think this kind of shows the markout on that roof. Wire diagram, which I think go to.
Fire department signed off on it?
Yep, we have pathways to the roofs along the
Okay.
side here.
Okay.
We would put a ladder on the deck to access this roof. Less than 8 feet. So.
Pretty simple.
Yep.
Trash off-site, I already saw, I think, on you, you're gonna
Absolutely.
take it back to your home base.
Yep, we bring a box truck with all the equipment, the panels, everything.
Junk goes back in, panels go on the roof.
That's it. Dumpsters at the office.
Simple. Any questions for the applicant?
These will be the LG, I think, 370s.
It's getting better and better.
Better and better. Yeah, 5 more watts than I think 2 months ago when we were in, so.
Wow. Any questions? Are there any abutters here? Would anyone like to speak on this project? I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Move for a negative determination. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
10-day appeals period, you didn't know all
Oh,
about
yes.
it? Okay, I thought you did, but
Appreciate it.
no problem.
You guys did a great evening.
Same to you.
Thank you very much.
Really? We have a notice of intent to demolish and reconstruct a single-family home from Helen and Brian Buer at 16 Plum Island Boulevard. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, my name is Brian Buer, I'm here with my wife Helen. It's our intention that hopefully this spring, we'll have the project completed and this will be our permanent residence on the island. What I have is some pictures, drawings, and also a narrative. I should have brought some more copies, but here's basically what I have up, included in here, narrative. And,
Brian, a couple of things before we get going.
Sure.
You've got everything there. The only other thing is the local fee is $250.
oh, it's 250?
Not, yes,
Okay.
because what the local fee does is it mirrors the WPA fee. So instead of going to a Cat 1, you're a Cat 2 in the WPA. So you're
Okay.
the same thing on the wetlands bylaw.
Oh, sure, you can drop a check off
Not-
tomorrow.
not a problem.
Whatever the difference is. I think we gave $100?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
Yes.
so it's additional $150.
Yes.
What I can do is, for the benefit of everyone, I prepared a short narrative. Will only take a couple minutes to read it. This is about 16 Plum Island Boulevard in Newbury. The location of the property is basically, this is a copy of the USGS ready to come on the island. Approaching, this is the cottage liquor store right here. Surfland, bait and tackles right here, the beach home is right here. So the property itself, number 16, is adjacent to the parking lot of the liquor store. This is the parking lot of the liquor store right here. And this is the existing, dwelling on the lot right there. Basically, the existing property is a 6,186 square foot lot located on the southerly side of Plum Island Boulevard, next to the cottage liquor store's parking lot. Its improvements include a full 2-bedroom, single-family detached dwelling, gravel driveway, and parking, a wooden walkway and a small retaining wall, water and sewer, and overhead electric. The lot is without any wetland areas and is sparsely vegetated with a few small cedar and pine trees and some grasses. There exists some debris, which include a pile of old bricks, wood, and some cement blocks. The existing house is located at the rear left side corner of the lot. As you can see, right in here, it's kind of like tucked in the corner. Both the left side and the rear of the existing house is only about 3 feet from the lot line. And does not meet Newbury zoning requirements for sideline and rear setbacks, both of which are 10 feet. The existing house, it measures 29 by 27 feet with a 9 by 8 addition on the back. And our intention is to demolish and replace it with a new single-family dwelling measuring approximately the same footprint, 28 by 28, with a 10 by 14 foot elevated deck on its rear. The proposed dwelling, so the site survey plan prepared by the plan surveyors. Here's the existing dwelling showing in the corner, the driveway, there's a few plantings I mentioned, evergreens. So the intention is basically to move the footprint out of the corner to the center of the lot, so it meets all the setbacks. And they say here, the proposed dwelling will move forward and send it on the lot to meet all Newbury zoning, front, side, and rear setback requirements, and provide for more space between the abutting dwellings. So that these houses on the side and the rear. There's VC here, and also this one right here. So like the house is basically going to be centered, there's a house here, here, and here. So the house will be centered in between the two homes to have like the space in between. The proposed dwelling itself will be constructed in pilings in conformance with Newbury's wetland bylaws to be served by, again, municipal water, sewer, propane, and overhead electric. After demolition and removal of the existing dwelling, the site will be cleaned up of any debris. Those plantings, there were a few plantings. There's like a pine tree and a couple of cedars. These will remain. We're going to transplant those, to a different location on the lot. And minimal grading will be done to accommodate the proposed dwelling's new location and to improve the existing gravel driveway. We're proposing to do basically perimeter plantings of black Japanese pines around the perimeter of the lot, and also fill in with some indigenous native bushes and complete coverage with dune grass. Also, we intend on putting a split rail fence to be added to the lot's perimeter. Those sections probably without any fencing. This fencing kind of like to the rear, and while there's looking down the side, it's fencing here. There's actually some fencing in the rear of the property. So nothing to be added there, but just the open portion. Do like a 2 or 3 rail, split rail fence. That's pretty much it. Do we have any questions?
Brian, I really didn't see much wrong with the application, but on the other hand, I really didn't see much.
Yeah.
We've only got 8x11s, and I would love a copy of those 24x36s you've got there, or whatever they are. It would have made it a lot easier.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The other thing is, I didn't see a piling plan. Did I miss that on the small size?
No, we haven't done it yet.
All right.
Basically.
You're gonna need a piling plan, you're gonna need it for DEP too, you're likely to
Right.
see that when you get their comments.
Okay.
So over-design your pilings. If you need 8, put in for 12, because
Right.
you can take 4 away. It's harder to add them, come back in and ask to add them, so.
Right. I'm expecting to have 12. I'll probably, like you said, I'll up it 16. Because 28 feet, try to, like 4 pilings that give, an 8 foot, a little more than an 8 foot span, which is fine.
It depends on the size of your
Yeah,
steel that you
right,
wanna
yeah.
use, there's all kinds of things that
Yeah,
can
so
play into it.
I'll do a layout for, it says 16 pilings.
Okay. So you wanna show that on one of these drawings,
Sure,
just
okay.
show the H pile,
Yeah.
just as an H on your drawing. The other thing is, I noticed we had no elevation, and you made the comment you're gonna keep it up 2 feet, but we're still gonna wanna see an elevation, so, something that's gonna show your utility shaft, where that
Right.
comes in,
Okay.
and just a simple elevation, it doesn't have to be from every single side.
Sure.
It's a fairly simple structure, so I don't think you're gonna have to do too many sides with it.
Yeah, actually, we're in the process of doing the plans now for the ZBA, so we're going before them, for the findings, so, hopefully within a week we'll have, the plans, so
Okay.
along with those, I'll include the piling.
And the only other thing that I saw up there was, what are you gonna, any treatments underneath it? Are you gonna pull, you gonna lattice work, you gonna do anything like that?
Whatever's permissible, but, currently, based on our discussion.
Leave it the way it is?
Leaving it up 2 feet, open, and we said, stairs up to an interior landing that will be up 2 feet, as well, so.
When you're doing your planning, you might wanna plan on 30 inches, it's 2 feet, and 2 feet's the minimum
Oh,
though.
right,
What
yeah.
happens is, they start out, they frame everything at
Yeah.
2 feet, and by the time they're through walking along around the lot, they have 20 inches.
Sure,
And then you're in some you have a problem.
right, yeah, in fact, I was gonna show that, I remember the conversation we had, I had a note, to do like 2 sections of 30 inches.
Yeah.
As the open space between, finished grade.
Helpful to
and
keep
the
you out
lot.
of trouble.
Yep.
Pulling the old house out, are you gonna need to bring any sand in? It just sits on old cedar posts and, or do you have a void under there?
Right, there's, yeah, it's not much on the underside, basically.
What?
Yeah, I know.
Makes some sense.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Oh. Pull them up just for the question, no, I can't find them. Yeah, it's basically up on post and there's some, debris and stuff, underneath and so forth. I don't expect to be bringing any material on site because, it's slight little, like we're sliding it forward at a little lower elevation and just cleaning up the site. I think we have to bump out a little area on the right for the walkway, so that's gonna be, thing with sand, but, any displacement from the gravel will be more than enough material for the sand on the site.
Okay, yeah, when you create your driveway, you.
Yeah, it is minimal, it's pretty much staying.
But if you're
same.
gonna do that, if you're gonna do some grading on the site, and that's why I asked it, you're gonna need to do some kind of topo if you're gonna do a grading.
Oh, yeah, we do have the topo on the drawings.
Oh, on the drawings, you
Yeah.
can see, okay.
I'm sorry, yeah. Yeah, basically, we just, something of 2 contours.
Oh, it's the 22 feet, I was getting confused there. All right, I see the 14 here, you got, yeah.
There's a 10 and a 12, we're just bumping them out a little.
So if you did anything under here, you would take the sand that comes out of the driveway, you're gonna displace with the gravel, and you're gonna put it in here to maintain that 14-foot contour all the way around.
That's correct.
All right,
Yeah.
state that somewhere
Yeah,
if it is.
well, actually, it's, around the house, it drops off, like, it's 14 against the fence, but basically, there's like maybe like 13, like, or 14, like, it'll just drop down, so we have it wrapped. It's shown here. So that's the 14 right here. So it's pretty much keeping the real contours.
Okay, so you're taking, I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're taking your 10 and you're making it 12 just around the house to match this 12 all the way around.
Right, just to be able to
It's-
get,
I-
provide access,
all right.
like, into the,
Yeah, I can see what
to
you're
the
doing.
house, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so there's minimal grading, that'll be done on the lot.
How about, what your propane storage, any items on the ground?
Nothing will be on the ground, anything like, still having propane, in my, square footage that I have proposed, I have an extra 60 square feet just to include like maybe like a raised platform for a couple propane tanks, and, that's all I really, but basically, I said, the footprints are the same, I think it's about 50 feet more that's being proposed than the existing at the end of the deck, and I added an extra 100 feet to the front stairs. The front stairs, and I'm not sure what the stairs will come off the back.
Yeah, I noticed that you listed in your narrative that you're gonna have stairs off the back. Oh, are they on this one?
No, I'm not sure if they're gonna have them interior to the deck themselves or exterior, they may just be like notched in, you know, so that they'll actually come under the deck and not
I
like,
got
on
you.
the side.
I got you. If you're gonna do that, this footprint's fine. If you're gonna add to them, you're gonna put them outside,
Yeah.
we wanna know that, we wanna get that on here.
Sure, okay. Yeah, so the intention was to do them on the, you know, on the inside, that, you know, don't need a big deck out back or anything, so
All right.
that was the intention.
Any other questions or concerns?
Do we need to see the propane on the plans?
It wouldn't, certainly wouldn't hurt to just note where your propane's gonna go
Okay, sure.
on your plan.
Yep.
We're gonna have this, utility chase size, right?
Yeah, basically, you're just gonna, follow up one of the pilings, just take an enclosure on one of the pilings. So somebody near the center of the home, so, you know, relocating the utilities, you know, just gonna do a chase right around one of the existing pilings.
40 inches by 40 inches outside, maybe?
I don't even think that, maybe,
Okay,
two
3
feet
by
by
3,
two, yeah.
all right.
It
You
wouldn't
can,
be
you
more
can
than
draw
three.
that in on the
Yeah.
elevation anyway, so we
Okay,
can see
sure, yeah,
underneath, okay.
yeah,
Is this gonna have a garage under?
yes, it will, right.
So why are we talking about 30 inches?
Well, that's for the open space of the remainder of the house, you know, to conform to, you know, regulations.
You really only, the whole house could be down at 2 feet. So many times when they put the house up at 7 and park underneath it, they drop the sides down
Oh,
to that
okay.
2 feet solid, and then they make it look like the rest of the house, it's clapboards or whatever, you know, shingles.
Oh,
And
okay.
then your open space is that underneath,
So the whole open space isn't the entire under the house?
correct?
Okay.
Well, it's totally around the perimeter, it's gotta be the whole perimeter.
That's gotta be
But it
30.
doesn't have to be from the first floor all the way down. It's gotta be from 0 to at least 2 feet, closest point to closest point.
So the finished floor height is what, something up?
Basically, the first floor,
20,
is-
you
the
know.
first floor foot height is approximately, 2 feet above the existing, no, 3 feet, I'm sorry. Well, 3 feet above existing.
And what's that? It's existing.
The,
Just, do you know?
I'm just trying to figure out how you get a garage underneath there, and what's
Yep.
the finished floor?
So we need to spec.
It's an elevator.
If we get an elevation, that'll work anyway, and we don't have to put it through this tonight.
I have to look at this real field work, but, like we're sliding the house, forward and down the hill a couple feet, and, you know, the house is up about,
How much headroom you looking for underneath it, Brian? How much you gonna have underneath it?
8.5 feet.
8.5
In the garage,
feet?
Yeah,
8.5 feet, and you're starting at elevation 12.
right,
Well, it's 20,
It's gonna be
Yeah,
about
21.
elevation 20,
Right.
somewhere.
yeah, you're not sure of the framing, a minimum will be like 12 inches, and depending how, if it's steel, if I'm going on top of the steel, so then
Or
like
inside
another
of it.
foot, right, yeah.
I did notice that there is mention of here of the flood zone.
Yes, the property is located within, you know, FEMA's 8 flood zone,
13, but you're gonna be
elevation
way
13.
up.
And actually, the proposed floor of the garage, you're gonna make it about 13.2, 13.3, just like 0.2 foot above. It works out, you know, nicely with the flood elevation.
I think that's where I was getting at with, you know, propane tanks, anything that's, you know, we oftentimes see, you
Right.
know, like a air conditioning unit sitting on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
just kinda doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
That does mean you'll be bringing in a considerable amount of material though, because where you're moving this house, it's 10, so you're gonna make your garage floor 13, you're gonna be bringing in about 3 feet out towards the front there. Couple feet of sand and
Right,
then
yeah, right.
some gravel
Yeah.
on top of that, I would imagine. Okay.
Yeah, like that, almost like where it slopes, you can see where, like, it slopes a little.
Yeah.
So it's sliding, and so the back end is fine, it's kind of just the front.
I understand it, it's just if you're gonna start moving with that kind of volume of
Yeah.
materials around, we just wanna know how much of it, where's it going, and get some actual lines down on the paper.
So I would expect maybe, a couple loads of gravel, like 30 yards, 40 yards of gravel, to cap the driveway.
When you do your elevation, would you carry the driveway down a short distance for us? Off that elevation, you know what I mean?
I don't follow you.
We want a section or an elevation of the structure. So, and I don't care what view it is, whatever one's easiest to do, whatever
Sure.
one's gonna
Yeah.
catch everything as you're looking through the structure.
Yeah, so as I said, I have it, it's still in draft, but, the numbers
Exactly,
are
so
good,
when
accepted,
when
yeah.
you do that, you'll be able to show the land, the existing land contour, the new one, and just show it in a profile version.
Okay, yeah, I have it from, like, the street, the existing grade, the proposed grade.
Excellent, excellent, if we can get that down on something that's, yeah, so you're taking good notes.
Yeah, so this is the existing, as he said, sliding it forward, and, I'll do a cross section, so in the driveway, the
Okay,
existing and proposed, the underside 30 inches, and where the utility shop is.
Brian, I don't see anything that's inconsistent with permits that we've written before, it's just getting the information here so that we have it in the file.
Okay.
And I also kind of wonder if some of these staircases, like, all of a sudden you're much higher in the air and there's only-
Chasing the
there's
ground.
like 3 steps.
Yeah,
The entrance stairs is just, it's gonna be a 2-foot landing and 2 treads. It'll be like 3 rises up to a landing, going in. Maybe,
And then sort of an interior stairway.
yes, basically, you come in to an entryway, it'd be a common hallway, the bottom of which is gonna be 30 inches above grade. The bottom framing for the entrance, festival hall will be 30 inches, and they'll provide access from the garage and also from the exterior.
okay. Are you gonna do any hung storage? Have you?
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that in the garage, probably, yeah, that was a good idea.
I mean, the zoning board of appeals has a profile for that, I guess, for lack of a better term. Yeah, they'll have the square footage, they'll have the height, there'll be some stipulations on it. I don't think you can gain entrance from the top, it has to be
Yeah.
kind of an exterior kind of thing. But if you plan on doing that, show that also on that
Sure.
elevation.
Okay, yeah, it would just be like cold storage,
Yeah,
nothing,
exactly.
living heated, living space.
Yeah. No, it couldn't be because it's gonna end up being, actually, it will be above flood, so you won't have to worry about that.
So, to understand correct, basically, on return trip, before then, we drop off an additional $150 fee for the local, prepare a cross-section of, the property showing the driveway, the house, existing and proposed grades. Also, which will show the 30 inches up from finished grade, and also the utility shaft going up and the piling, drawing.
Yes, please.
Propane tanks.
Yes.
And the other thing that was noted, I heard one of the members of the board talk about some plantings in the black pine.
Yeah.
Was more concerned with maybe a native planting, something that is
Sure.
like a cedar or something,
Yeah, I know there's, actually, I think that's a black pine right there, that's the nicest thing, there's a couple of cedars, these are just gonna remain, the only thing,
how's that black pine doing?
oh, real good. Yeah, the figure when they demolish the house, it'll be there with an excavator, I think, probably they could, scoop it and just put it somewhere, to the side, save it. It's nice, that's the best thing on the lot.
Yeah, no, I understand, it's a great idea, especially where the house is, to put a privacy screen in, and like, you want something this dense like that, it'd just be great to see a native species there.
Yeah, now isn't Japanese black pine the native?
Well, Yeah, I don't know if they're native to Plum Island, but there's a lot of them on Plum Island,
Right.
and I know they had a die-off, they had some problems with them down there a few years ago, people were complaining they were losing them all. I don't know if that's continued or not.
Related to Korean.
There's actually,
That's not.
I think you had provided us with a native planting list. I have it in here somewhere. It's
Okay.
everything's getting all mixed up. But, you'll be happy to talk to you, basically looking for like an evergreen, something that do well and provide like a thick screen.
Yeah, the cedars would do good.
Yeah.
They do well there.
Right.
Yeah, you got a lot of headlights and stuff that you wanna block, so,
Yeah.
yeah, you want something there.
Yeah, it's not bad, 'cause it sits up just high enough above the parking lot, I think, with this screening like that, looking forward, to meet your location, to walk to pretty much anything.
Fun place.
Yeah.
Anything else from the board? Brian, you got any questions for us, any other questions?
Excuse me,
I'll-
I'm your neighbor.
Oh, hi.
I was gonna go to the audience, and
I've been listening intently, and you had your back to me, so what side is all these trees that we're talking about?
One second, would you just identify yourself?
Sure, my name is Heather Sinton, and I live at 18 Plum Island Boulevard, and that is my existing fence on that side.
Good evening.
Okay, are you in the house in the front or?
Both of them,
Oh, both,
they're both
okay.
mine, so.
Sure, well, actually, the intention of the plantings, we're gonna do the entire perimeter, all the way around.
Okay.
In those sections where there is no fencing, we're gonna do a split rail fence, along with the plantings.
Well, along our border, there is actually a fence the entire.
But I saw that, there's,
We left
This-
sections of.
this fence,
We
and
left-
on the other side, there's a split rail, I think.
We left sections, the back section is the planking, and then it comes off of the planking and it's split rail. So
Okay.
it goes the whole way.
Sure,
There is an old, picket fence, but that's actually on your property, which is why we didn't,
all right, that's the one in the front,
it's
that section,
kind
it's
of
kind
on
of the
those
last line,
sections,
right,
yeah,
yeah.
that's yours. If you didn't know. No, I wasn't sure, I wasn't sure if you were talking about doing the plantings on just the,
On the parking, on the.
on the parking lot
Right.
side. I just don't wanna have an issue with tree roots and stuff like that coming, and things get big and then they
Right.
fall over, and things like that, so.
Yeah. Well, the pines, I believe, they're not spreading roots, they're pretty much concentrated, and if anything, go deeper. But, we're not just doing like white pines, that type of plantings, they get huge fast and.
I just don't want them to become my problem, I guess,
Oh, no.
I guess that's what
Right,
I'm
yeah.
trying to say.
They're gonna be planted, probably 5-6 feet off the property line, the diameter of them, at maturity is maybe like 6 feet or something, so there's still be, plenty of room between that and the, on the other side, like the fence and stuff.
And my other thing was, I just wasn't sure, this is not my language, so, what exactly are we talking about in terms of the elevation? What is the increase in height elevation when it's all said and done?
Well, what's existing there now, it's a single story, so what we're proposing to do is a garage under and a 2-story home.
So what are we talking in terms of feet from where it is right now?
Let's see,
We're gonna be, Brian,
Okay.
40 to the peak by the time you're through?
well, the maximum building height at Newbury is 35.
But that's mean to mean. That's the middle of the upper
Right,
roof
we-
surface, so you could easily go to 40 without,
Yeah,
if you're
we're
up
not
there.
doing a pitched roof, it's gonna be a flat roof,
Oh,
with
okay.
just like a parapet, along the sides. So, which would be under 34 feet. The existing structure, I believe its height is about 15 feet, from ground. So we're basically adding another 15 feet on top of that.
And the other thing, when it's all said and done, what is going to be the total new square footage? I was kind of confused, we were talking about adding porches and,
Right, no, the total, 1,500 square foot home. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot home.
okay, I thought we could only have like 1,230 7?
No, it's relative to the size of the lot. So you take your lot and you
Yeah.
multiply it times 0.20,
Yeah.
and that's the size, that is the amount of lot coverage you can have. So that's everything that a bird would see if it flew over, except for the ground level driveways and things like that. So any stairs, decks, outbuildings, that all counts to your lot coverage. And then you get 25% for your FAR. So now you're stacking your building. So you get your lot size times 25% for your floor area or living space inside of this structure. Decks don't count for that portion.
Okay, that's what you know, and I think, I'll tell you something positive, I'm very happy that you're moving that more to the center of the lot.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It is so, but I just, I don't wanna wake up one day and have this big monstrosity beside
No,
me, so.
so basically, as you can see, like, it's tucked in the corner, and it's
Yep.
adjacent to this house. So basically, we centered it between the two homes, so it provides, maximum distance, between the homes, and
Mhm.
just opens everything up.
Okay.
So like that, very neutral colors, nothing, no purples or.
You're gonna block me, you're gonna block me from the parking lot, I'm real happy about that.
Any other questions? You all set?
I'm good.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Then I think with the amount of material that we need, and Brian seems amenable to coming back next month and submitting those things to the board.
Yeah, I'll have all this submitted, I regret saying it, by next week.
Okay. Thank you, beautiful. Then it would be my recommendation, unless we have any other questions for tonight or any other comments for Brian, so that we don't bring him back a third time. Bringing back one more would be great. I would recommend, go ahead.
Move to continue.
Thank you.
Second.
I was wondering when you were gonna stop me.
I was too
All those
polite.
in
I already said it.
favor? Any opposed? All right, Brian, we will see you on December 17th.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a request for a determination of applicability to install propane tanks and associated piping from Greg Radner at 10 14th Street.
I'm representing Greg, Rachel Harris from Best Architecture. I just got a text from Eastern Propane that it's in fact 2 tanks,
Okay.
not 1. I don't know if that hugely impacts
No,
things.
Thank you.
Like,
You're welcome, Brian. Have a good night.
I tried to draw it on here and then regretted it because I wasn't sure if they wanted to put it to the side or front or back.
Gotcha.
But, here's my tear sheet. So, the
There
issue.
is a bunch.
The issue arose that there is no code compliant place against the house. There's 4 exterior doors on this very small house and windows like every 3 feet. And there's just literally no place to put it. And but Greg would prefer actually to have it against the house. He doesn't really want it floating out in space.
I spoke to him, so I know he.
Yeah,
he
and
wanted to.
yeah, so he didn't want to do that. It's not shown on this plan, but there is an existing 6-foot stockade fence both on the side of the property line and it's directly in front of where we want to put the propane tanks. So no one will really be able to see them particularly. And that's what we need to do. I don't know if there's additional questions.
I don't really have any how are you gonna secure those?
So I spoke to Eastern Propane. He said they typically just have a concrete circular pad that's 30 inches in diameter, and it's just placed on it. And they felt comfortable that in this location that was sufficient.
Well, I've dealt with the gas companies before, so that doesn't surprise me.
They probably think everything's sufficient, right?
Yeah, I suppose if that street gets subject to wave action, we've got bigger problems maybe than a couple of floating gas tanks, but, you know, when they go in and they're new, it's wise and it's only a matter of time, I would imagine, before the board demands they're held down, so. But that's not your issue, that's the gas company's issue. It's a short trench, it's an 18-inch trench, about 6 or 7 feet long, so I don't have any issues with it. Any questions or comments?
Well, I'm just looking at that pad, I mean, if it's 2 tanks, it would,
They'll each have a pad, yeah.
you know, it would seem like if you had one pad, extra thick, it's something to physically constrain, it wouldn't be that difficult to do.
They don't usually do, they have precast pads, so they don't usually bring a custom pad. If it's something we wanted, I'm sure they'd end up having to do it, but I'm not so concerned with the pads. In this case here, I'm not, we're in the,
Middle of Woodland Street, it's kind of it's not low.
no, it's not, you know, and maybe at some point, every place on the island, we say, hey, you're gonna have to bring a helical with you, and you're gonna have to tie it down, so it doesn't go bashing against your neighbor's house at some point, we might wanna think of that, but, that is probably in the X zone at this point, would be my guess, but it might not be, anyway. I don't have any issues with taking a small trench under here, if you want them tied down, say so.
I don't really have any, you know, problem to pick with it either.
Strong
It's
feeling.
just like if you're gonna put 2 30-inch discs, you know, with one, I think it's more likely you get some wind action
And scour, or maybe,
undermines
I
and,
agree,
you know, and then the thing's laying on its side.
Yep.
I don't have a solution.
I guess our only solution, you know, and we can talk about some of the times to come up with a preferred process, a standard procedure for tanks, and, you know, give it to the gas company, this is what it is, and you don't get to sign off unless it's like that, so. But I mean, for the purposes of this tonight, I don't have any issues with it. Unless anybody has any condition they wanna put on this, or any question. Would you like to speak?
No, I think I might be up next.
Okay.
Hopefully, since you're the only one here.
If there are no questions from the board, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Prove as presented, move to approve as presented.
Negative determination.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay.
The night spot. I was just talking to JR.
You here for the Kavanaugh?
The notice of intent for Papalato.
Okay. Those are both Tom Hughes, so Tom Hughes is representing you, true?
Yes,
Okay. He's a new report.
he just texted me, he's on his way.
Okay, that's fine. What I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna skip over those two, and give him time to get here. I assume that you want him here to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to, if you want, I can summarize the project, and it's entirely up to you, I'm just conscientious.
No, it's entirely up to you. If you've hired him to represent you and you wanna wait for him, not an issue. If you wanna go ahead and present your project, that's up to you, it's your project.
He's got all the boards. So,
We can go through all the other stuff as well.
Yeah, if you've hired him.
oh, if you got other agenda
Oh, yes,
items?
yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay, sure, that'd be great.
Okay,
Thanks. Do you want me to take off or?
Oh, no, God, no, it's still an open meeting, you can stay right here. We have a request for a certificate of compliance from Joseph Holtbreath at 7 Northern Boulevard. It is DEP number 50-1177. I don't know if you remember, but I went down there and he had some outstanding issues. He had a head-high shower on his back deck, and he had added multiple boxes, large boxes, maybe half the size of his table, of stone to negotiate some elevation changes between his driveway and his home. He asked what he could do about those, and I said he could come in and he could permit these changes in a different way if he wanted to, or he could remove them and get back into compliance, and he did. He removed all his plumbing from his shower. He removed all those extra boxes of rocks that weren't permitted in the first place. There was just one that came off the driveway and went to the stairs. And it is my opinion that he is now in substantial compliance, and I would recommend granting the certificate.
How extensive was that plumbing that got removed?
The only thing that was left was the head on here, and he had cut the plumbing here and it was gone, and he cut the plumbing here and it was gone. All I saw was the raw pipes.
Okay.
Am I stupid to think that maybe someday it doesn't get connected with a piece of flexible? Well, that's, you know, what I saw at the time was compliance. That's all I can say.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's like a room.
Ben Franklin.
More years and I'll look like Dan, it'll be perfect. I can really roll like that. I like it.
Next library.
I gotta lose a bit more off the top.
Not that, not that.
Get that really crazy look.
Fly some kites and
There you go. We have a request for a certificate of compliance from Brian and Beth Dacey at 323 High Road, DEP number 50-1282. They have repaired their outstanding issue. The only issue with them is they had put a small addition on the northeast corner of the home and called me out there, and their vegetation was not what it should have been. They went out there, replanted. It looks great. It even looks better than this photo. And so I was out there on the 5th. And it would be my recommendation to grant the certificate at this time.
Move to issue the certificate.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, sir.
It helps if you clean up the green, doesn't it?
I was like, never reply?
Hashtag that's okay.
First time there was a beer bank and then silt was rolling over the silt fence. So
Good, just sign it.
I have questions.
you can have as many as you want.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, if you'd like to wait for him to come in here and,
That's good.
okay.
Unless he said he's gonna be here for this certificate of compliance, he's charged for this tonight.
I don't know, that's a good question.
You wanna skip that one?
I will if you want me to.
I don't care.
Well, we can go right on to it. If we have questions for him, we can ask him. We have a request from Bob Britton at 171 Orchard Street, DEP number 50-1300, he needed a certificate of compliance for a deck and a access driveway. Repairs were made. He first came in 2 weeks ago, and.
So this is not for the entire project, this is.
Oh, no, not for the entire project.
Oh, okay.
For this,
Did
It stops
he
right
get the DEP and CZM permits and provide them to us prior to building as he was supposed to?
he did exactly what we put in the order of conditions, so.
So he got, that was
No,
perfect.
he didn't. What
He was supposed to get all the proper permits and provide them to us prior to building.
I'll show you what he did. This is what I had looked at going down there. He had made, down the end of it where the thing went through, he had no mound like we wanted, so we've got the mound.
Okay.
We don't have his file, do we?
No, you couldn't.
I couldn't locate it. It's all in storage. It's my opinion that it was done according to the order of conditions, and it is done in substantial compliance with the order of conditions. You can question that if you want.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sign off until he shows me that he got CZM to sign off on that.
Okay, we'll let him go through what he did for his permissions.
Okay.
All right, you wanna hold off
I
on
mean, yeah,
this one?
everybody else can sign off on it, I'm just not going to.
Does anybody else wanna move forward with this, or
So, yeah, just, the suggestion is to table this until.
until either Tom gets here, or we decide that we're gonna move forward with it? Okay. I have a request for a certificate of compliance from Elizabeth Otovic at 41 Fruit Street, DEP number 50-1306. It was a septic system. I went up there today expecting to refuse it, but they did an excellent job. The vegetation was full, and that's what I didn't expect. So it's my recommendation to the board that we grant the certificate of compliance.
Move to grant the certificate.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
DEP and CZM signed off on, agreed. Show me. That's, he's in, I think we would probably make him pull it out. Says it in very big letters. You can build it, but it's not supposed to be there.
We good with the next one?
Mhm.
We have a request from Frank Gross and Claire Wagstaff at 125 Northern Boulevard for DEP number 50-605. There is no file on that one. That is one that was destroyed. Using best available information, I went down there. The lot is fully vegetated. It's on the west side of Northern Boulevard, and it's one of those lots that is not much of a resource area to begin with, but it is, it looked like they did a little work on a deck out back, but so long ago, it looks like everything grew there, so it would be my recommendation to grant the certificate of compliance.
Move to grant certificate.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, this is the old.
Yeah, it's
600 or something.
605. It's not the oldest one we got tonight. Tom? Kavanaugh's up first, we can put these aside now.
Do you wanna swap them so that?
That's what I was just gonna suggest, that, Mr. Papalado's here, so we might as
Yeah.
well start with him. We have a notice of intent to replace the existing single-family home from Charles and Diane Papalado at 6 Riverfront.
Good evening, Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consultant. I'm here with Charles Papalado. And mailing, they only sent me one tear sheet, which should have the other files, so you get the original. Okay, so Mr. Papalado owns an existing single-family home right up at the top of the bank on Riverfront, right on the Parker. You can kind of see this whole area is the bank. Here's a view from down in the, there's a bank down to like a marsh shelf that then goes to the bank proper of the Parker. It's one of these places, been there forever. It's got, you know, it was built in the 50s. It's got dock going through the marsh, stairs going down to it, all that kind of stuff. There it is there.
It's got
And
mice too.
what?
It's got mice.
A few mice, so single family plus. And then it's got, you know, a series of like retaining walls and patios and things like that that are right around the top of the bank. So what is proposed is to tear it down, rebuild it with a new home with attached garage, with a driveway that leads into it, rebuild an existing patio. The areas in green would be hardscape removed and vegetated, shed would be removed and vegetated. And on the profile view, you can kind of see, the profile gives you an idea of how steep the bank is, and the structure that's proposed. I do know that I went over the map a little bit with Doug, and we've got to trim some of the square footage off the plan. And he also talked to me a little bit about the proximity to the bank, and there's been, you know, a home there forever. We are gonna take a look and see what we can do, whether we can squeeze it back a little bit. Did you get a chance to scale it?
Yeah, I nice to meet everybody. So I got some of that feedback, and the current foundation line that's proposed sits exactly on top of the existing foundation line. The structure, however, is cantilevered over that by about 2 feet. So what I would propose to claw back some of the square footage, I haven't seen any of my wife yet, but is to take the foundation line back 2 feet, which would keep the actual structure of the building on the old foundation line. So we move this section here back, as depicted, and figured that like plot was down. But it would take this foundation line back 2 feet by obviously the length of that building, which gets us about, I calculated about 50-ish feet or so back on the plan. And then in addition to that, I made modifications in the front of the house where we don't need all this pervious material. We can plant that with, you know, local indigenous shrubbery and what have you. And I calculated that to be about another 100-ish square feet. So in the past 2 hours, since I got that feedback, I worked to pull back that foundation line by the 2 feet, and then reworked this area. It'll actually look a hell of a lot nicer, honestly, at the end of the day, with those pieces in there.
Yeah.
Then in addition to that, I believe there was a comment associated with roof water runoff on the water facing side of the house. So I drew and just took the water facing profile and proposed on the eaves facing the water side that would otherwise drain to the water side is to take and gutter those with downspouts and then backfeed that to the front of the property. I didn't have that training, the existing, soils there are super, permeous, so I think that's a
Yeah.
good solution to.
Yeah, Doug and I actually had that discussion about the soils.
Yeah, the soils on that side of the river are fabulous.
Yeah, they're awesome.
So we'll bring the water back away. The other thing was, we'll just clarify some of the management practices around the work so close to the top of the slope. And the thought that Doug and I discussed is we'll give you sort of the medium sandpaper version of it all, that provides you all the detail you need, but then suggests that once the contractor is on board to do the specific bit of work, that they would provide any refinement to that management practice.
I would imagine that the board's a little lost because they weren't privy to a first conversation, so.
But
Yeah,
we're continuing, they're gonna give us the,
well, one of the issues I had with this was they made the simple comment that they're gonna take and they're gonna redo that retaining wall up front. It's likely gonna be with masonry. So you're certainly not gonna work that masonry wall from above, you're gonna work in front of it, right? So, yeah, so you're gonna be in the banking.
We're gonna do the top course down.
Yeah, you're gonna go from the top down, sure you are. And then you're gonna have to dig, you have to put a footing in there. How are you gonna keep the integrity of that bank with all that work there? So I had some serious concerns about that. The same with the stairway over there. The stairway is more of a general, we'll replace it with stone and masonry. Well, that probably wouldn't fly even amongst us. Never mind when you take this thing and just hand it to a contractor and you say, here, go build this. So we wanted to get tighter with the details without eliminating the contractor's ability to come in and say, well, I don't want to use a 2x4 there, I want to use a 4x4 there. Just something silly like that. But have the details down and have, at least in the narrative, what we expect if we're going to allow work on that bank. So that's how we ended up with this, with these changes already.
And the other thing that we talked about is that we've gotten a lot of permits lately, and here and there, a contractor goes, and they don't really do everything by providing the additional detail right before construction. They're getting a little bit of ownership of it and aware of it becoming an issue, which is something. So we're gonna look at, this is a set of stairs that comes up. The bank here is all determined by a DEP policy, the top of the bank. It's a cross section through and where slopes change and everything. So you see the bank kind of does this thing like this because of the way the topography changes. So this set of stairs is existing and runs up, and this is the one that's being replaced with stone and masonry. We can also, between now and the next hearing, talk about whether there's some other alternatives. I know in Newburyport we had one where we went from a stone proposal into one where they were gonna put 2 concrete pads and do a welded iron stairway with open grading. And then when the contractor came to do the concrete work, he looked and said, this is gonna be way more disturbing than just doing stone set into the ground. And they ended up going to a stone set in the ground thing. So we'll put a little bit more thought into exactly.
Yeah, one idea that I don't think will be too invasive of an approach is perhaps just to put, pieces of granite slab on, landscaping in there and as landscaping based steps versus a pulling system or something like that.
So more like a trail
That's all.
kind of thing.
And that way it actually looks more, will fit in with the environment, I think, a little bit more kindly and would be certainly a lot less, make a lot less mess in terms of construction. If it would just be essentially moving out these are 4x4, like old railroad ties almost. Take those out and just replace those with pieces of granite cut into the side of the hill. That might be the best solution then.
why not just stick with wood or go to like a AZAC or something like that, cause it's just gonna be less disturbance overall.
Well, if we went to an AZAC, we'd have to build a frame system in there. There is no frame system there today. Do we have a picture of that?
It's, you can see parts of it in your pictures,
Yeah, it's in,
at least it's lower toe.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not what we're referring to.
no,
Sorry,
it's a higher,
But just to, let's gauge them on that. So that picture right there is this existing stairway
Oh,
down.
right,
So that's-
gotcha.
This, if you look at the topography, it's a
Right.
hill. It's
Oh, okay.
basically 4x4s cut into the topography of the hill. that were rebarred
Yep.
in.
Sure.
And so we could just remove those and replace in kind with a piece of granite right in the same,
We're in the same footprint.
right in the same
Yeah,
footprint.
that, actually,
Yeah, yeah.
that's probably preferable.
Yeah, I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I thought we were talking about, I lost where I was.
A mold anchor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll clarify things like that, we'll provide, you know, the general BMPs a little bit more than just the erosion control. That was essentially what started the discussion is, we have erosion control running along the top of bank, and Doug was concerned that just erosion control alone is not necessarily gonna be as protective of the bank as he'd like to see, given its proximity. And, you know, and Chuck and I talked about it, and, you know, if this bank goes, this house goes. So there's an interest there, beyond environmental to keep that thing intact. So anyhow, so, you know, it's a tight site, and there's not a lot of alternatives, to how it gets placed. We'll do that move back. There is a setback to the street. And I know that one of the things Doug had mentioned is the idea of coming into the end of the promise with a well there. That kind of has an issue. And I think the other thing was we're concerned about having the driveway sort of up against the road.
Yeah, so, forgive me, are you Doug?
I am Doug.
Okay. So on that, just one thing to be clear, I'm not moving the foundation back and then moving everything back this way. I'm reducing, right, the size, I just wanna make sure that that's clear. And then the reason for, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the road, but the road is 95% accessed from the east to the west on Riverfront off of Cottage Road. The neighbor here has a double lot, so the foundation for the neighbor's house is probably here, so they actually have a double lot. The reason why that we didn't move towards having the garage doors placed here, it's generally typical in the street that that's been done. I think the look and feel architecturally is much more pleasing for the street, to be honest with you, such that when you're driving down the road, you would essentially see this coming in this way. So that's essentially why we did that. It gives us a more open green feel for not just our property, but the neighbors as well. So we're trying to appreciate, their open space.
Sure, and you can make this work however you want. The only reason I suggested that is my simple mind said that's a way to make this work a little bit easier,
Right.
to eliminate some of your issues. So, no, there's more than one way to skin the cat.
Sure.
This is the view from the east, and that's the view from the
That's
west.
right, that's the view coming down the street here. Yeah. And then coming in this way.
Yeah, and it's a 10 scale plan, so it may look big, but it's
No,
it's not as large as it appears. Yeah, so it is a sensitive location right at the top of the bank, and we recognize there's a few things to do. So what I was thinking is we come in, present the project, get a laundry list of items beyond the ones we've already talked about, and if, anything we need to address, we can either try to answer now or move forward with just getting the plans updated and the information to you.
Where's the septic field?
Septic field is on an easement on the other side of the street. Septic tank is.
Yeah.
No, I just wanna show you that this is in the wrong place.
Oh, okay. The right one went out. Just doing a lot of stapling.
One other comment, you should be very careful with any vegetation removal on that front bank. There seems to be a tree in the picture that got cut down on that bank.
That tree got the windstorm last year, wrecked almost 2/3 of the top of that. And so I just cut down that last hanging piece and removed it. So it was more or less destroyed in one of those ice storms that we had last year, or 2 winters ago.
Do yourself a favor and just call next time,
Okay.
all right?
Do you wanna see us try to see if we can plant something in there, it's a pretty nasty steep bank, I'm not so
It
sure
is,
it's a wise thing to do.
like this.
I'm not suggesting that, I
Yeah.
mean, you know, if the tree died, then the roots are still there, and nature will take care of the rest of it like it always would, but if you're out there and it was taken down because you can't see so well, or things like that, you're gonna get yourself in some trouble out there on that bank, and I just caution you against that, that's all.
Yep, got it.
And this application has nothing to do with the dock and float system? or
Nope.
any of that?
Nope, that's all existing.
Any other comments for the applicant?
Can I get a little, you said that this year is gonna be replaced, is that, forgive me for not reading the narrative yet, Tom, but.
Yes, that is all a wooden wall that they propose to replace with stone masonry, some type of, and that was my concern, that bank in there, once you open that up,
Oh, yeah.
and you're working stonework on the river side of it, you've got some planning to do there to be able to do that and not make a mess.
We may be better served with replacing it in kind. It's 4x6 now, old, been there since probably the house was done. Maybe just replacing it with the same, where we don't have to tear up, or just go down to that base timber, replace that, you know, pretty much in the same footprint versus having to build footings. It might have to put some tie backs back, you know, in this direction.
Yep.
Yep.
Just to suck that thing, that base timber in, but replacing it in kind would be, I think, would decay some of those risk items that you're talking about,
I agree.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I also agree, towels, so you're gonna
Could you
wait for the
build,
royal of royal tides, barge everything in.
here's the existing wall, where do we, and just build a new wall behind it, and take the
You
other
could
one out?
absolutely do that.
Yeah, take the other one down to the ground. I was gonna suggest that too, if you insisted on the masonry wall, that's gonna be your outside line, and you're gonna dig on the inside of it, put your masonry wall
Yeah.
up, and then you could remove that down to ground level.
And that becomes your barrier for the whole project. So if we could just contemplate that when we come back
You
next
can
time.
think about that
let's-
also, yeah.
Alright.
Again, there's more than one way.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
sure.
so we just need to,
That's what I was looking for, is just that's complicated part, so I was like, alright, let me,
yeah,
I wanna think about that.
I see it as either, you know, doing something like that, or the other option is, you know, we just phase it, you have to do a street length of it at a time, so you're not opening up the whole bank all at once. We can go through.
I'm also thinking about, you're not going broke either, so.
Yeah. Well, so Timbers.
I'm okay with this.
Yeah, Timbers work.
I just tell my wife, you guys told me that.
It's
on camera.
Oh, Jesus.
Just don't tell her about the YouTube, you're fine.
It's okay, you can throw us in.
Trying to do two of them.
Okay, so I think it's pretty straightforward unless there's other thoughts, comments.
For me, I think we're all set. My recommendation that we continue this to the December 17th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're the great Parker?
Yes.
Yeah, I met you on the dock.
Oh, you're the duck
Yeah,
hunter.
yeah.
How did it
Stagger.
go? Did you get out there early season?
No. I was tuna fishing right up to,
Oh, were you?
yeah, right up till the end of the commercial over there, so.
Good season this year, right?
It was, yeah, that's one.
Thanks again, everybody.
Yeah, so we'll talk maybe tomorrow the next day. See if we can-
It's just a matter of thinking.
There it is.
I'll do that. Yeah, sure. Thank
There
you.
was some good fights out there.
We have a notice of intent to install a platform and seasonal float and ramp from Sarah Kavanaugh at 254 Middle Road.
Mailing. And actual picture. Okay, so. Tom Hughes, who's Environmental Consulting, here on behalf of, the estate of, Paul Kavanaugh. One thing I realized is
Has there ever been an existing dock there?
yes,
Can you show us?
yes. Okay. 1971, it was there through the 80s, but this photo actually has it in.
Yep.
The photos that are later have the storage up in that.
Is there any existing footprint to it anymore?
I didn't look too hard for it, I did not find it. Okay, so this,
Yeah.
yeah, the one thing that we did do is we added erosion control to the site plan, realized we didn't have that, but let me go through the project a little bit first.
So you still have to apply and get all the permits from DEP.
So, we'll go through the permit process and go through the project first.
Okay.
So what we're proposing, this property, this is one large property owned by the estate of Paul Kavanaugh, who recently passed away. They have owned the property since the early sixties. The whole meadow along the Parker was mowed regularly. By regularly, I mean every year. I believe it was twice per year to maintain it as meadow. And they had a dock in there from the sixties, before it was AC/DC, straight up through the eighties when the kids became adults and went off. And, for example, Sarah Kavanaugh was, I believe, what's the big sailing World Cup? She was on, World Cup team at one point. I mean, these guys lived and breathed with the water.
What's the date on this photo?
This photo is 2013.
Or was the boat wasn't there yet?
No, I don't, well.
No,
No,
it
it's
was
not.
like
Yeah, it's in the.
Right, no, yeah, no,
Because we
there is
walked
a-
by it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a sailboat with it, which is a pretty cool sailboat.
Yeah, definitely.
So anyhow, so what we did is I came out, she originally talked about permitting the dock where the old family dock used to be. And I came out and looked at with it, okay, where is the best place to put a dock here on this property? There are really only two even decent options. One is over here right by the bridge, but you have a wider wetland shelf. You kind of have a steeper hill that comes down, and then a little bit of a wetland shelf you have to cross to get to the river, and then you're right where the bridge squeezes the river in, so the currents are nasty in that spot. The other thing is, to get to the narrowest part of wetland, you end up having to be right next to the road, and you also remove some trees that are in there. So that, while if that was the only way in, might be an okay way to do it, but it's really not a good spot to do it. Over here, there's this upland ridge. It comes out. It largely stays out of the AC/DC till you get up into about here. And it's an area that has been mowed on a regular basis. So what we're talking about doing is you actually leave the house, you come up through a break in the stone wall that's right about here, and a mowed path that's gonna be coming down. We'll have to break through the stone wall right here. And then the mowed path goes right out to a platform that doesn't extend out into the water. From the platform, we attach to a float system using a seasonal ramp. This area, since it's been mowed regularly, I don't really consider this an alteration because we're just talking about continuing to mow. We're just gonna leave it to the future property owner, which is another thing I need to explain. So the current plan that the Kavanaughs are trying to get to work is that this portion of the property would all go to Fish and Wildlife. A small area around the house would remain sort of open for the landowner, future landowner, to do what they wish, and to be a conservation restriction on the upper portion of the property. So, and Greenbelt will get that. So Greenbelt,
Is the dock gonna be located on the Fish and Wildlife property?
part of the sale to Fish and Wildlife was their agreement that there could be a mowed path to a dock. So,
Can you put that on file with us?
the sale hasn't occurred yet, but I mean, that is, I think they've talked to you, Doug. I don't think there's
No, that's fine.
firmly in writing.
Andy,
but-
I think, is involved in it.
Yeah,
Um,
we just want to get a copy.
I mean, I have all kinds of back and forth with them, but nothing.
No, it's fine, it's just like moving down.
Right, so what we've done is, so it's an upland platform, it's essentially a deck that's elevated. And we placed it as far back from the bank. There is a little bit of a cut under portions of that bank, about 6 inches to a foot. where the upland is kind of sticking out a little bit. So we tried to, and I'll show you. So what we did is we put the platform, this is the lip, and we put the platform back a little bit, put it up 3 feet in the air, and it's through flow decking. It's over upland, but we want to have a healthy meadow growing underneath it. And then it's a seasonal ramp out to a float system. This is a 10A float system. So what this needs Conservation Commission approval, it needs Harbor Master approval, and it needs an Army Corps approval. So that's what this means. And I know Doug sent me a brochure from Gloucester. And I'm familiar with that because I've permitted dogs in Gloucester. Yeah, and in that, there's actually a pretty helpful section because it has a section on 10A.
It has that, no, the 10A is not the problem, yeah, the 10A is fine.
Yeah, so it's entirely a 10A dock, which is here, which basically in Gloucester, keep in mind, Gloucester has a 300-foot buffer to the ACEC. They have a lot of procedures and process. But basically there they require a letter from the Shellfish Constable, and they require permits from Conservation Commission. So in this case, you know, we don't have any kind of platform that extends out into the water. We don't have a dock or a pier, so we don't need a Chapter 91 license. We just need the float permit, which is under Chapter 91, but that's a 10A.
Yeah, no, it's the platform of the ACEC.
But the ACEC is not Chapter 91 lands. Chapter 91 is Meehan, Warner, and beyond.
Yes, you know, I understand that.
Right.
No, I'm saying that, yes, but
Right.
so that takes care of that water.
Yeah. So this, under the Wetland Protection Act, basically refers to ACDC and just basically says you need to presume that that area is significant to those interests for which the ACEC was adopted. And what we've tried to do is, first of all, this whole area has been regularly maintained since before it was ACEC. At the time it was designated ACEC, there was a dock present, so it was part of the ACEC designation, was a structure that was there. And we're building a ramp to a platform that is through flow decking, which will allow full vegetation underneath. So the impacts are extremely minimal and all of the functions will continue. My biggest concern in this whole area right now is the stopping of the mowing on the Fish and Wildlife. And I've let Fish and Wildlife know that. My strong recommendation is that they do meadow management here, because you've already got multiflora rows starting to come in and some of the other woody invasive species, and that area will become a tangled mess. It will begin to lose habitat value because it will become monoculture of invasives. So my recommendation to them is they do, you know, perhaps a late fall mow after everything's gone to seed, or an early spring. Late fall is easier to schedule regularly. Early spring, you know, if you have a wet spring, you don't want to be out here even in the upland with a machine if you can avoid it. But whether or not Fish and Wildlife takes them up on that, you know, or takes me up and does that, but that will have far more of an adverse effect on the ACEC. The other thing, the ACEC boundary is here. So what I tried to do is have the continued mode section be as much as possible out of the ACEC. So we just come in, we ride, if you were out there, you saw how it's kind of a nice ridge there. So we just kind of ride that ridge and then we just come through, and it's a 60-inch max mow strip.
There's no permit needed for that though, under 310.9, for the, not for the mowing, but for the platform.
No. No, anything behind mean high water doesn't trigger Chapter 91. Any permanent thing beyond the anchoring and the floats requires Chapter 91. But if it's just seasonal floats, the ramp, and the anchoring, then it's a 10A. Now the problem with the 10A, and if it wasn't ACEC, I might recommend they get a full Chapter 91, which you can for a seasonal system. The problem with the 10A is politics in the town changes, the harbor master changes. The harbor master changes their policies. They can start not issuing a renewal for an annual permit. You know, so that's the risk with a 10A permit. There's an awful lot of 10A docks on Parker. You know, you wouldn't want to you wouldn't wanna
I
be
wouldn't
there
wanna
with
be the
that.
guy that does that.
Right,
Anyway.
right. But I mean, but were there to be some emergency in a section of the river in 1 year, you know, the harbor master could say, look, we're not issuing permits this year.
Sure.
No docks. And that's the beauty of 10A, is it does allow a municipality to be flexible. So anyway, with this, this is integral to the whole formula of selling the house with some waterfront value, so they're not giving away all of the real estate value to the house in order to be able to sell the property under market, in part to Fish and Wildlife and good conservation restriction. The other part, you know, is getting a dock so that the future homeowner can kind of have the same enjoyment that Sarah did growing up, which is, you know, having a dock there and learning to love the water. So there's that. I think the only other thing I've got some photos of the area, but I think that aerial where I put my wetland flags on kind of says it all. But this is the bank area near the bridge, and you can see that there's sort of this rocky area, and then there's a shelf of wetland before it starts rising up. This is a historic photo. Here's the upland area for access. You can actually see some of the multiflora in there. Here's salt marsh that's kind of west of the area that is up. From the dock area, this is wetlands. Wetlands are on the right, uplands on the left. So again, you know, everywhere around that river is wetland except these two small sections of upland. And then this isn't just a view of that bank where the dock would go in that area. To me, it's one of the most beautiful properties in Newbury. It is gorgeous. And, you know, I fear what's gonna happen to the house when it gets sold. You know, if it were me, I'd move in tomorrow, as is, I don't care, you know. But
It's getting a lot of work.
it's out of my budget. I know it's a lot of work, but
I know, I'm telling you, my wife doesn't, that's a conversation for another time.
yeah.
But I've been in there. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I met Paul several years back. Doug may remember, but he was talking about removing some trees on property, and we talked about what was involved in permitting. He opted just not to do it because it was too much of a pain in the neck. But I really enjoyed my time talking to him, and at the time just was like, wow, this is one of the most amazing pieces of property. So
I'm glad it's gonna go to the state and
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you should be permitting it as if that's not happening, but understanding the backstory and kind of why we're trying to get this permitted now is, it's important. But, you know, if Fish and Wildlife walked away tomorrow, then the family's left with much fewer options.
See a bunch of houses up there.
Well, I mean, the whole thing, my understanding, started when there was a discussion with the builder, and then they began to see what the buildability or build out. And from what I understand, it was a fairly thoughtful, modest build out that was being talked about, but it was enough that scared them because of what they fell in love with, was a whole piece of land. So,
piece of land.
Plus, there's additional property behind this that's also up for protection.
yeah, there's Fish and Wildlife land all around here, and this helps connect it, much of it, which is another thing, which is awesome.
Is there gonna be, so the Fish and Wildlife's gonna own straight out to the street? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, my understanding, probably best looked out. And again, you know, the survey, the A&R and whatever has to carve it up still needs to be completely done. But my understanding is it's essentially everything down here. I think it's bounded by, there's a wall here. I think it's bounded by the wall. And then it transitions over to the stone wall that runs over here and then just kind of loops back and captures all that wetland. And then there's a stone wall on the uphill side that we come through with the path. I believe that's the boundary of the conservation restriction up here. But again, I've seen a draft plan, and you know, it's all sort of on aerial images and not formalized in a full survey. But
There's actually a greenbelt acquisition off your map there of another 20, 30 acres.
which is awesome, yeah.
So almost that whole bank, I think, is gonna be Fish and Wildlife or Greenbelt. Greenbelt's already got like 3 or 4 other parcels going upriver.
Yeah, so anyhow, it's, in terms of the dock, it's a thoughtful design on the dock, it recognizes where it is in the ACEC. It's in the best part of the river to have a dock there from just having a small craft in the water.
How much sanding did you do on this profile here?
That was done by Donahoe, they did the,
Those are the water depths shown? or-
no, they did, it was all land-based survey, but they were able to shoot it at a real low tide. So they were able to get, quite a bit. So I don't know.
No, I'm just sort of wondering, if this shows at a low tide, the
Yeah, the profile
thing's
shows,
gonna be definitely sitting on the bottom.
right,
With
and,
no
and
water, no boat tied up.
and it's designed with
Grand
skids, right, it's designed with skids. So if these are my floats, what I would be doing is I'd have a kayak or two down there, and I'd pull them up on top of the dock and I'd chain them to it when I wasn't using them, and just, go down, throw the kayaks in and go up.
I noticed you had your legs at 18 inches, why'd you set them at 18?
Core standard.
They've been coming through with 24 and 30, some of our comments.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see what, that might be adjustable, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we can adjust, I did not see any DMF comments.
I didn't see any either, I checked the computer after we talked about it.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that the last couple projects I've filed that have gone to them, the comments have just gone directly to the towns that haven't seen them first, so I'm hoping, I've asked them, again, to send me a copy.
They're down
What's that?
3/4 of their staff.
Are they?
Yeah.
Is Tay gone?
Tay's there still, but Kate's out on maternity, and Jill moved on to CZM, and they haven't backfilled her yet.
Oh, jeez.
And then,
Okay.
and they had somebody else helping out, who also went down to the New Bedford office. So
Yeah.
so that's probably why there's a lag in review.
Yeah, unlike natural heritage, marine fisheries just gets whatever time up to the hearing to comment, but were we to get a serious comment, I'd be willing to talk to the client and try to file a minor to address it, but I think we filed based on the BMPs that are incorporated in the small dock pier guidance and the Army Corps requirements.
With the angler pairs, I want to see them in Marsh Village.
My guess is the walkout float will ground probably, onto the sleds most tides, and that the actual T float will probably be floating for a good portion of the low tides, but not all.
What is the plan for storage of the rampant floats?
Offsite or in the upland up here. There's part of the agreement with Fish and Wildlife, I'm certain there's gonna be no float storage down there. I mean, if Fish and Wildlife owns it, there can't be any float storage unless they agree to it in the upland down here.
Yeah.
So it's same as what we had at that other dock, it would have to be floated out to a ramp, or in this case, could you bring some type of a lift over the bridge maybe and lift it up onto the bridge, I don't know, but more than likely you just float it down to the boat ramp.
In the academy was talking about just going over there with.
Right.
Here.
Right where the road meets the river.
Yeah.
Lifted it out with a crane.
Yeah, I mean, that's all a possibility, but they would be removed from the water and from the.
Yeah, I just don't want to see them brought up over the marsh and sitting on the marsh.
Yeah, high tide
The old
floating
king
around
tide
right
pull it
onto the-
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
No, I mean, the problem is if Fish and Wildlife
The
owns
king
up
tide.
here.
Yeah.
Much as they don't visit their properties every day, they certainly visit their properties every year, and it would get back pretty quick, I think, if there were floats being stored.
I just say we condition that the floats are stored outside.
Yeah, stored in upland offsite. I should say offsite, right now, this whole thing is a site. So, I would ask that you say stored in the upland, because that will eventually be here, so they can either store it here. because ultimately they won't own this, the permit will go with this. But you could say, you know, upland by the residents or something like that.
It's just a matter of how it gets there.
Right. Removed,
I don't wanna see it removed across the,
then say,
The
then how
marsh,
about
that's what I'm
that floats shall not be removed through the wetland areas?
Had to be removed off-site seasonally.
Yeah, that's fine.
One thing that gets me with these things, and I think we're just sort of talking, we try to improve our understanding of how these things are supposed to work, is, I'm just sort of wondering if we issue an order, that pretty much stays with the, you know, it doesn't get, there's no certificate of compliance, because you're always kind of wondering if it's compliant. Do they typically, you know, would you go get a certificate, or would it just stay on the deed for the next owner?
Well, that depends on whether you put that in perpetuity. If you write it in perpetuity, when the certificate of compliance comes, on the certificate of compliance is a spot where you list those conditions that don't come off the deed. So you'd list your permanent condition, they could get their full certificate of compliance, and then it would only show on the deed from then on that there was no storage of any dock facility within the wetland.
Yeah, you just,
However
you word something that says it's a perpetual condition that survives the certificate of compliance in the order. If you don't say it that way in the order, then you can't make it perpetual through the COC.
That seems significant thing to me, but also, like, you've got a very carefully designed float structure, the bungee cords, the helical pot, you know. Somebody could just say, oh, that's a pain in the ass, you know, I'm just gonna throw some concrete blocks out there. I would like to see something so that if, for instance, somebody modified did not follow the as-built.
So how about just two perpetual conditions? One is, the float removal one.
Right,
Right.
that has to remain as built as designed.
Well, and then say any deviations from the approved design shall require Conservation Commission review and approval.
I mean, that's kind of what I
And you
was
can make
thinking.
that as a perpetual
Yeah.
condition. I mean, frankly, any dock that's in, if there's been a COC issued and somebody goes and changes it, they should be coming to you guys.
Right.
Now, in some cases, if it's in like a river like the Merrimack, it may be that you're having an 8-foot float and the Conservation Commission writes a letter and says it's fine, you know. But it may be in something like this, where you've got something with grounding at low tide, that you actually require a new filing, or you require an RDA, or, you know, something, so. So you don't really have to put it in order, but we're fine with that being in the order.
I mean, it'd be like any other new work in that resource area, they'd have to come in and file, but, you know, would they? That's the question you have with any project or any
Right.
person.
when you make it a perpetual condition, then you can't claim
Then
ignorance.
it's there.
Yeah.
And the only trouble with those perpetual conditions is they sort of get lost as we all move on, board members move on, and really they're pretty much left up to the homeowner. In this case here, I think you're right that, you know, fishing game will be watching them. And
Yeah.
it'd be more under scrutiny here than anywhere else probably.
Yeah, my guess is there'll be additional conditions that end up in the purchase and sale that apply to the owner that, you know, are probably more stringent than what we're talking about. I mean, I don't know what those would be, but, you know, I've seen those fish and wildlife negotiations before.
Well, I don't think Fish and Wildlife was thrilled anyway, so I would imagine they're gonna have some fairly tight conditions.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think would they love to pick up the property clear of all this stuff? Yeah, but I
Sure.
think the chances of them picking up the property without it, and they recognize that, so it's
Slim.
yeah. So the benefit to them is they get an amazing piece of property with having to tolerate a minor incursion, from the person who's selling the property to them, which I think is a pretty reasonable ask. And I'm actually impressed that Fish and Wildlife is working with it.
Good.
So.
Just general topic here, what is the Army Corps, what are they looking at
So they look at, they have 3 tiers. They have SVN, PCN, and full permit. And they look at square footages, design considerations, and location of various things are all in this big grid of regulations and where we fall.
Yeah, the programmatic permits, they have general permitting schedule,
Right.
so you basically look up your type of project and say, this is self-verification, in which case you just send in a piece of paper and say, this is what I'm doing. And I'm gonna,
Well, it's a little more than that.
Yeah.
They do require you to send 11x17 formatted plans
it's,
of the thing, so they do look at it. And I always send the plans with I think this qualifies for this level of permitting, do you agree? And then they tell me yes or no because whatever, and then we file.
Yeah.
Right, because even if I self-verify, I want their input before I self-verify, right? So,
Presumably they're involved because it's navigable waters, right?
yeah, no, they absolutely, so even a self-verification, you're basically saying, you've got all these standards, we meet them. And they've determined because of the size, the configuration, the design, that is then low risk, that they will be certain to approve it basically. So they let you self-verify it. The PCN is one where they say, we're pretty sure we'll approve this, but we want to look at it and we may require some adjustments. And then the individual permit is just a process.
You know, kind of where what I'm trying to figure out is, so you got one dock here, and then, you know, somebody up, it's not like gonna happen in this location, but you know, you get like multiple docks, and then they go out further and further.
Well,
Pretty
yeah,
soon
so
you have
it's
navigation
based
problem.
on, yeah, but so you can't block the navigable channel, can't be in the navigable channel, there are all kinds of requirements, those are in the list. You can't block more than a third of the low flow channel, I think is a requirement, they changed that here and there, but there are a bunch of things that prevent that. And if this was, say they never sold it, say somebody put a dock in, right, and then they want to put a couple more floats. That can all be, you know, if it's self-verification, be all self-verification until your float triggers overall the next step, and then it's a PCN. And then if you add to that to the point where you trigger a whole permit, then you're getting a whole permit for something. You know, you can't just build a marina in pieces. So,
it's through the COA that CZM gets to review things,
So CZM gets it through there.
through the COA,
How does DEP get it?
chapter 91.
Chapter 91, so if we were doing a permanent structure beyond mean high water, DEP would get it. If we trigger a PCN or a full permit, then it goes to, through the core review, it goes to CZM, it goes to the tribes, it goes to the Board of Archaeology, Underwater Archaeology, Mass Historic, like all these people get involved. And then CZM makes a determination whether or not we need to do a federal consistency permit as part of the whole thing.
So one of these comes in, DEP has, they get a copy of this, just like they get everything else. If some of the things we're contemplating now, like no disturbance in the ACEC is important to them, why aren't the comments through here?
Well, so
Why do they choose not
well,
to?
no, so in this case,
I'm not even
Well,
talking about in all cases.
ACEC is CZM,
right.
so that's why it's like.
So the ACEC is not like a wetland that triggers a permitting requirement, right? But what it is a declaration that if the state gets involved in a permit for something that's issued by the state, then they pay attention to the ACEC issue in a different way.
And under 31010, the wetlands, sorry, I'm from Connecticut, where it's wetlands commissions.
Yeah.
The Conservation Commission should be taking it 3109 into consideration. It should be taking the ACEC regulations in 3109 into consideration.
So
with all these.
So the Wetland Protection Act regs say how you bring ACEC in, and that is through evaluating those things of significance that are in the declaration of that particular ACEC, but they don't bring in other regulations. The things that bring in the other regulations would be the federal consistency review if that gets triggered or whatever. But if it's an SVN, then it doesn't reach that because it's a self-verification and there is no additional review. The tribes don't get it.
So DEP doesn't need two bites of this apple, they get their bite
They've
right
got
here.
their right through their comments, we've got a file number. So, there's no comments that have been posted I'm aware of. And,
But the no, like the Gloucester thing where it says no new structures in the ACEC.
Yeah, so what they're talking about, is Gloucester has their own ordinance, wetlands ordinance, that applies in a very strict way to the ACEC. And they regulate the ACEC with performance standards that you guys don't have in your bylaw.
Yeah, but if you read 310.9, it says no new structures outside of, there's some exceptions, or your town can have an out if you have a natural resource management plan that stipulates something, which we don't. So,
We don't have to prove.
yeah, so,
Right,
so
but
therefore,
you
no, it doesn't, in my reading of 310.9, it then says you can't do all these things in the ACEC, there's a few exceptions, but this would, I'm not saying that it applies to this case, but say you wanted to put the docks where it was not originally, in a new location, straight across the wetland, then the reading would be that that's not permitted.
If it gets triggered, right, and the way it gets triggered is by triggering a state permit that's needed, right? So the triggering.
310.10 says, for all these different areas, including tidal marshlands and stuff like that, you should go by what is written in 310.9, which says, don't do this.
I'd have to relook at that. The regulatory analysis in here includes the ACEC section and how it applies to this.
No, I think this is good.
Right,
I
right,
agree.
no,
I'll tell you what
Yeah.
we're leading back to is 171.
So my recollection of the whole thing is basically you have to have triggered the state permit in order for that ACEC stuff to fully hit. And then otherwise it's at the discretion of the commission, and it's based on how are we impacting those things for which.
So no significant to
ACEs.
no? Is that the jump? No significant impact to no impact?
No adverse. It's
No
No adverse effect on those things that are deemed
Those
significant
functions.
for the ACEC.
Yeah.
So for example, in another location, we may not have done through flow on that dock. We may not have done, hand-driven posts for that dock, like on that other site. There's sort of means and methods parts of it, and design elements that then come into it. It heightens how you design something so you don't impact those things. That's the way I look at it. It would be really good if we had the management plan, because then we could actually look at doing permanent structures. I wouldn't go for a chapter 91 permit for a permanent structure in Newbury right now.
At this point.
At this point, just because of what, I wouldn't say I wouldn't go for it, but I would warn my client that you're in for, a bumpy ride with an engine and a like. But for this one, I feel confident in a number of ways. And one is, there was a structure there when this thing was declared ACEC, right? So it is part of the designation of it as ACEC. And it's a good design, we're protecting the function of the buffer in the ACEC, and we absolutely minimize any impact to the ACEC.
Any other questions for the applicant or concerns? Is the board ready to close the public hearing? Then I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I'll do a motion, it's a negative
It's an
determination.
No, it's an NOI, so it would just be moved to approve, either as permitted or with changes.
Where we have the two conditions.
Okay, slow down a little bit. So we've got a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Discussion.
Discussion? Go ahead.
Say that we amend the motion to include conditions in perpetuity for removal and storage off-site, so meaning that they have to be removed off-site, they cannot be removed on-site. Do you understand what I mean by that?
They can't be removed over that
Correct.
existing, over the marshland.
Yes,
the,
correct.
The wetland resource, I should say.
Yeah, removal and storage occurring off-site, and that they can conform to the
So
floating pier conforms in perpetuity to
What is approved?
the approved plan. Any changes, any changes?
Deviations.
Need to cover
Is that rule of floats?
the floats and ramp.
And ramp, they can't store the ramp on the dock, on the deck?
Just not long enough, I don't think.
I don't think, I mean, it would balance up there,
What is a 32-footer on an 8-foot platform?
yeah,
Yeah, it's probably not gonna work.
Not the best, maybe.
as long as it doesn't get windy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so the one thing I would ask is, I think that when you say off-site storage, I think, I mean,
Okay.
I think storage up
Yeah, okay,
here would be
yeah.
fine, right? So I think
Yes.
it's off-site removal and no storage in resource areas.
Sure.
Or the ACDC.
Yeah.
And then we get the ACDC into it.
Sure. There you go.
But I get what you guys are suggesting, I think those are both fine and protective.
Is this gonna be built, or is it somebody's gonna give the new owner the permit?
My understanding is the new owner would build it, however, in negotiations, who knows, the Fish and Wildlife may say, we want it built so we can inspect it before we take property. You know, I don't know, but we're getting it permitted right now to be packaged with the sale.
Is there a buyer already?
I don't think there's any PNS entered. I know there's been people looking at it, including me every time I go there.
It's an amazing view.
All right, board, on the table, we have a motion with two conditions. The removal and storage occurring off-site or on property, no resource area, no ACEC. Any deviations to existing will come back to Concom for approval.
And just a question, is there some construction narrative in here, similar to what you did?
Exactly the same, yeah.
So that covered the construction impact.
Construction narrative. So I guess we're to all those in favor. Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Don't go too far.
And thank you for being patient with me.
No problem. As a matter of fact, the timeline was pretty right on. We still have some items left, as a matter of fact. Tom, we were working on certificates of compliance.
Yeah.
And we got to the Robert Britton 171. I'd made a statement to the board that I had inspected the property and it found to be in substantial compliance. And then we got into the same discussion we just got into. And I didn't do anywhere near as good a job explaining to Ben as you did. So would you walk us through this one, please?
Okay, well, the permit was issued, but so the structure is behind mean high water. Mean high water has a defined elevation both in chapter 91 regs as well as in 310 CMR. So the final posts that support the structure as well as, the deck, all of that is behind the mean high water line. So it doesn't trigger a chapter 91 license. It's essentially a walkway platform that does go through wetland, but it doesn't go over the line into the Commonwealth Tidelands section. If you read the definition of what tideland is, it clearly states that it goes to mean high water. So essentially what we have is a platform with through flow decking In that case, I look at the alternative of somebody not having something like that and walking through there on a regular basis on the wetland ground to throw a kayak in, and the impacts of that versus having an elevated platform that will allow vegetation to grow underneath. The vegetation that's present there, if you remember, included some saltwater species and some freshwater species. It's a brackish transition. There's skunk cabbage even in that. It's the first time I've seen skunk cabbage in what I would have expected to be a full-on brackish salt marsh. Skunk cabbage loves the shade, you know, there'll be only slight shading from that walkway. So in that case, when we checked with the Army Corps, they looked at our plans and they agreed to self-verification was appropriate, so we filed that. We had to reformat the plans. That's a new thing with the Army Corps. They don't take 24 by 36 anymore. So we had to reformat them down to 11 by 17. We filed them and I gave that paperwork into Doug that we received from the Army Corps. And they worked in the email exchange that I had with the Corps analyst on, you know, how do you see this? And them saying, yeah, they thought it qualified. So.
So now it's from DEP.
DEP, as far as, well, that's why I had the question on the last thing. They get the notice of intent.
Yeah.
That's their opportunity, right there. And we have never got a comment from them relative to that.
I mean, I can show you, I'd have to dig now because they changed the online system. We used to be able to download all the comments from DEP and Newbury for the last, 500 filings, and all the comments would be searchable. Now when you download the Excel spreadsheet, it kind of pisses me off that you can't get the comments in it. But DEP has commented on projects before, Chapter 91 license required. They've absolutely done it.
Yeah.
When they see something they think triggers Chapter 91, they're not afraid to say it.
Yeah.
And when I review the regulations on what triggered a Chapter 91 license, it's very clear the jurisdiction is Commonwealth tidelands, navigable waterways, etc. And when you read all the definitions, it says to mean high water. So there is no Chapter 91 trigger for that in the regulations. And then we went to the Corps, and the Corps said SVN because of the size of the structure, location of the structure, and the size of the floats. So that's what was done in terms of our due diligence on that. And then when you look at what was constructed, it's narrow through flow decking, allows light through, even in the adjacent upland. The path was, as we discussed, 2 gravel stripes that go down. Steve Sawyer.
The path was very well done.
Yeah.
That was very well done.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed at what I saw. And, I'm confident that basically, any trampling impact that you see from the guys that went in there to actually build it, is gone in this spring. I mean, there's nothing permanent in terms of.
You're almost 6 feet under that at the end.
Oh, yeah, it's up there. The elevation of the platform here is at 10. So there's actually a nail in this tree. You can actually see the ribbon right here. That's the benchmark nail. It's set at 10. So things up at 10. Mean high water in that area is, we call it 4.1. I think it's a little bit dampened, but it's 4.1 is the average of the nearest buoy. So that's what, that's what mean high comes from the 19-year tidal epoch.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I will go back to my original statement, and I
Well, no, I think I don't know if it's for this case, but I think that I still have a disagreement with Tom, or I need to go back.
And And that, you know
And,
something,
you know,
that's absolutely
Yeah,
fine, and I
yeah.
think that we should take that Gloucester thing and we should find out exactly
I have a
what's
message in.
regulations, what's desire,
Yeah.
and then work out our own, and once we're absolutely clear, then there's no mistake and we can start to implement it as.
Yeah, no, I think that this gets through, but it's, I think that we need to, I really do suspect that we have not been doing our proper duties and diligence with these projects.
All right, well, let's find out the.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, Gloucester does go above and beyond on a lot of stuff, and I think in part it's because DMF is right there. There's a much closer relationship between the city, and it's not always a great relationship on some things.
Kevin can look out the window.
But on others it is.
It doesn't have, I mean, the ACEC doesn't have anything to do with DMF.
No, but on a lot of things having to do with
The shellfish and
the types of things that DMF typically gets to comment on. They're right there, it's natural. But they also have really stringent regs, like I said, 300 to the ACC. I do think some guidance from you guys on dogs would be helpful. I mean, when we came in with that 171, we modeled that, and what Bob Burton originally wanted on that was something akin to what was permitted and constructed at the Pumpkin House, right? That thing was, how long was that walkway? A couple hundred feet? Through Salt Marsh,
Probably.
you know, with a gazebo-like thing on it. You know, I mean, and that's the races. What I tried to do on both of those things that we just did in ACC is I tried to make them so they were as essentially as non-impactful as you possibly can design, short of hovering something in the air. I mean, and to me, that's been the standard. You know, I permitted a 200-foot long platform in Gloucester. There were some old posts.
But not in the ACEC.
In the ACEC.
In the ACEC.
In the ACEC.
Oh, but they're old posts. So it's
There were
existing-
some old
existing
posts.
structure.
Right. There wasn't much of a structure,
But
but there were some posts.
there's no structure here. Yeah, well, not here, but in the previous one, there's no structure, but you showed pictures.
Yeah.
There's proof of structure.
Right. But the point is, you know, in that one, we went right out, we stopped at mean high water, and we went with the seasonal. We could have actually gotten a permit for, you know, in that case, we could have gotten a chapter 91, but it just didn't make sense to, because Gloucester's never gonna tell this guy he can't put his floats in, you know, so. But anyway, so I would encourage you guys to come up with some guidance, clarifying documents, and if I'm wrong in a regulatory interpretation, I'd like to know, because I've been doing this for a long time.
We don't wanna hurt people either.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Just in that same light, I wonder if there's any way to correlate, or if we should be trying to, connect the dots on the 10A permits that are issued versus things that are permitted here already. You know, something, have any sense that there might be some gaps there?
Oh, you mean between what goes in the water and what we're permitting? Is that?
Well, I mean, maybe some people are getting 10A permits that have never, they're doing new stuff and they're not coming here too.
I don't know about bends on the river a lot. I have never seen anyone come across with a pier that didn't have permission to do it. I suppose it could happen at some point, but I've never seen it in 20-something
30
years.
years ago, the harbor master used to tell people it was okay to throw a dock there, you know. That was what 10A was, say, 30 years ago. I think that's changed quite a bit. I think if you want to come up with a dock policy for the park and for all of Newbury, my suggestion would be you get the harbor master involved, and you put together a work group, get some of the regulating community involved too, and just try to come up with something that's informative, not punitive, and that allows things to go forward that have a true environmental benefit, or, you know, no environmental impact, and try to avoid the stuff where people just try to do too much. But anyway, I appreciate you guys issuing the COC on that one. I appreciate you
We haven't yet.
determining But anyhow,
We'll have
so
your
I
appreciation.
will appreciate it if you issue the COC.
I'm gonna feel bad if CCM tells all these people they have to tear, like the pumpkin house in Britain, they have to tear the docks out.
Well, you know, they have their permits from you guys and they have their permits from the Corps, you know.
Yeah, it seems like I'm curious to see, because it seems like a regulatory workaround to do the 10A and then do SVM. So basically CCM, even though they have policies about what goes into ACEC, they seem fairly clear by going SVM and 10A, they never see it.
Well, one way they can fix that is they negotiate every 5 years a programmatic general permit.
Yes.
And they can negotiate the next one if that's a problem.
That's what should happen.
Yeah.
Put it
I mean,
on.
that's the
Put it on
correct way to
place.
fix it.
Oh, no, I
That would
agree,
make
I agree,
certain
but the
sense.
language in 310.9 says that if it violates, it doesn't matter, it goes out. So, I think that 310.9 gives CCM the ability to say.
Would you like a motion?
Yes.
I would love one.
I would move that we accept the COC for, what's the new motion?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Now I think. But still, I appreciate, I do appreciate the discussion.
No, we do too. It's, it needed to happen, so.
Yeah.
You got another one next week, next month?
I'm trying to think what I got coming. I know I've got stuff on the way, but I just don't know if it's gonna be here for next month. Always hard. I'll be back though.
Thanks for the warning. Have a good night, Tom.
Yeah, you too. I just wonder if my client's wife is watching.
That's his issue.
I can't even bring myself to watch a little bit of this. Or so I'll be wrong. Should have this one.
We have a request for a certificate of compliance from Elizabeth Danalicki at 9 Rivoli Way, DEP number 50-207. So this could have been one of two projects. It could have been a house that used to be on the property that they tore down, or it could have been the seawall in the front. 207 was probably back in 1974 or 5, maybe. I visited the site for all the good it did, and I printed out this picture just to show you guys that it may have been the house that there's sort of a footprint here that looks like they took a structure down. This right here now looks like a football field. I mean, it is just, it's all turf lawn. It's what it was to begin with. There's no sign of any building or anything left on the property. It was properly removed and it was healed in. If it was this wall right here, this wall is kind of a jumbled mess that does not stick out even beyond a new wall that was put there, maybe I'm gonna guess and say it was somewhere between 6 and 8 years ago, and ties perfectly into this wall, so I don't think it was any work down there. In any case, it was done in the 70s. It would be my recommendation that we grant this certificate of compliance to Elizabeth Danalicki.
I move to approve it to grant the certificate of compliance.
All those in favor? Aye. Throw that in. We have a request for an extension permit from William Garrity at 18 Riverfront, DEP number 50-1219. This was for a rather large project. It's been a little while to get his funding together, and let's see if I can find a plan here to show you. So that was the project. It's been 3 years now. Again, he was delayed in starting his project just due to financial reasons. And he finds himself needing an extension, so he has applied for an extension permit. It would be my recommendation that we grant the extension. All those in favor? Any opposed?
He hasn't started this project.
Oh, no, he's mostly completed. It's young Brownie's been down there doing it. And I think he's mostly done. I don't think he needs another 3 years, but he's not gonna quite get out of the wire, so. The only other piece of business we had was the notice of intent to sell the land at 61A at 277 High Road. So that was that series of lots that we looked at least 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. I don't know, one of the months I was here. And it was to divide that property down there into 4A lots. And so we were asked for our interest in it. It's a beautiful piece of land. It doesn't really contain any resources nor connect to any resources that the town would see to protect. And I think they've got a pretty hefty price of over $1 million on it. So
When was the selectmen meeting about? But didn't they schedule some sort of a
usually
public meeting?
they put it on the agenda. Yes, it's a public meeting, and I don't know when it was or is. Yeah, it may not have taken place yet. Yeah.
Just to answer your question,
Sure.
the house we looked at tonight has their septic system on another parcel, the same owner,
Mhm.
the Barton Croft or whatever it is.
Mhm.
What's the arrangement there?
They're not even close. Here's Riverfront right here. So the town landing would be right here, all right? And here's Cottage Road. So Cottage Road goes down and then takes, and my distances aren't quite right because I ran out of paper. So Cottage Road goes down like this. And then there's the old Humphrey Barn and residence at the end of Cottage Road where it comes out onto High Road where all that mess is there. This piece of the houses that we're talking about are in here, the ones that, the riverfront houses that are being repaired. What this guy's talking about is when Bobby Barton was still alive and the Humphreys still own that, they gave some of these people permission to put the easements to put their septic system across the road and over on this property. This property stops, I mean, there's a big field back here, out in here that I don't think's part of it. This property goes like this. These lots are all over here.
Yeah, no, I've got all that figured out, but I'm just sort of wondering, has there been any talk of disposition of the Humphrey land where the septic systems are?
Yes, because, well, not anymore. What happened was, a guy came down here, and I can't remember his name right now, but he flew in and he courted Mr. Barton for a while, and they were gonna buy this, and they were gonna put some homes back here. This is not a street, so there wasn't any frontage on it. There was possibility to get enough frontage up here if he dealt with this abutter right here to get his 50 feet in here and maybe get a roadway in, and they finally ended up scrapping it. One of these guys down here ended up approaching Mr. Barton and buying this piece of property off of him.
So that's already.
And those are done, and honored those easements. I don't think he's letting any other people come over to there, but those existing easements he had to honor.
That was just,
Yeah.
wondered if that was you know, in play or?
No, that's not in play, that's a that's a done deal now.
No, I agree, it doesn't really make much sense, given the price involved and all that. But there is some resource in that ag field there. Just briefly coming in, I was talking with Peter, it would be wonderful if they would try to do some OSRD thing in there voluntarily. You know, pack them in along the road and keep some open space, but.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this land goes with this, I don't know if it goes back that deep. Yeah, no, as you can see, I'm fairly familiar with the setup down there, and yeah, I don't know if this property here is a part of it, that field.
That field?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's all, unless they're splitting it up, it looks like currently that's the property line. But that would be all.
It does look, well, yeah, it does look like the house lots may come into there, I mean, I don't know what the scale is there, but, you know, I don't even know what they're looking at for size of lots, whether they look at it, I don't know, maybe you know, Peter, if they, I mean, it's on its way, okay. So if there are, we don't have much time left, but if there are any comments relative to the resource areas or preservation of them that you want this board to get into the selectmen, please forward them.
Is there any need to actually have a response at all?
I've responded already, so if there's any other comments, we can get in there, but I have sent a letter to planning, so Martha's got a letter.
It just seems like we don't have to really, I mean, it would be nice to do something, but it doesn't seem practical.
I don't think it's practical either, I think that there's other places to spend that kind of money that would yield better results from a resource standpoint. I'd rather take any money that we spend to acquire that land and put it into the pond down at the landing. I'm trying to rehab that, bring some life back to that, but that's another subject. All right,
Wasn't there a piece on Orchard the town decided to?
yes, a large piece.
Yeah, where was that?
No.
What?
Was it one of
Was
ours?
that the piece that, Pat was gonna look at buying?
Couldn't figure out where it was.
It's
It's like right landlocked by their own property, yeah.
All right, so with that,
Can I just add one thing?
absolutely.
So I was just, you know, I've been talking with Doug a little bit about this, and we've got Brian probably has looked at this stuff again too. I think we would do well to look over the existing wetland bylaw we have, because there's particularly linked to the flood zones. There's some, you know, talking about an AO zone that we don't really have in Newbury. There is an AO zone in Newburyport still, but I think there's some I think it'd be worth our while to review that and make sure it is current and, you know, it meets the needs of, you know.
Yeah, I think Brian and I have talked about this too, I've talked to Doug about it. Brian started to play with some language around the island. It's kind of been on hold with Brian being out of the country.
That's fine, but, you know, I think it's a useful thing if people haven't looked at it closely to kind of just take a look at it.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been, since 2000, well into the 2000, maybe 2004, 2005, when we did our bylaws. So.
Yeah, so we think Doug and I had talked about trying to form a subcommittee, and anybody obviously on the commission who wants to be on it, but probably commission members and people in town who are interested in helping out to revise the bylaw, go through the commission, and then to the selectmen to take it to a town meeting.
Yeah, and I think that's really wise, because I think that if you don't have input from citizens and others other than this board, you're gonna get an awful lot of pushback, so.
And I think that there's expertise in the citizenry of the town that we don't have on this board that would be useful as well.
Yep, no doubt about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? With that, I'll entertain a motion to close the public meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.